Welcome to the Ferrate Cast, where we bring you all things science, engineering, technology, and innovation. Today, we are joined by Gregory Lind, a founder, author, software developer, musician, and supporter of open source. A professional career spanning 25 years and more in each of these areas while traveling and living all over the world, but still calling Portland, Oregon home. So, Greg, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ezekiel. It's nice to meet you, and nice to get a chance to talk to you.
Oh, likewise, likewise. Greg, let's dive in. You have been working with AI tools for several years. So, what role should AI play right now in team management and product development, in your opinion?
That's a really good question. I think, in my opinion, a lot of people's opinions, the role of AI at this point should be more about informing, directing, and helping with mundane tasks, getting the boring stuff out of the way, so that a typical product manager or developer can focus on the more interesting, creative problems and really work on finding ways to get past the basics, I guess, and get into the more complex problems. Beyond that, I think in terms of management of products and management of software development teams, I think what we've seen is AI has helped us to get past the old, I would say, process problems that we had before. If you've used Agile or any of those other software development management tools, a lot of those are based on communication back up the chain and based on slower development cycles and iterations. And I think AI helps remove a lot of the blocks for developers, but it sort of speeds them past some of those processes. So I think one of the things that we're working on at Buildly is finding a new process that AI can be a part of as well as almost a team member. And so our AI tools help manage certain aspects of the process, manage certain aspects of the team, even down to releases and what goes helps plan releases. So I think it's really just about speeding up, getting rid of the boring things, and focusing on letting us, the team, get back to focusing on the really innovative stuff.
So, Greg, you founded multiple startups in different countries. What was the biggest lesson you learned from founding Humanitec and Buildly?
Biggest lesson, I guess, one of the biggest lessons anyway for me was about it's really a d- no different to found a company than it is to work for a company. So being a founder, I thought that I would have so much more control over how things were being done. I thought that I would have a lot more say in how the day to day happened with throughout the organization. And it turns out that for the most part, that's not really true. You still have the same customers that you need to work with and be able to help. Really, they're your primary focus. And then you also have investors, and you have team members, and you have co-founders, and you have, in some cases, additional employees and interns that you're also working with. And so you really have to manage a lot more, but also, in a way, you have a lot of bosses, more bosses, I think, than in some cases I've had in the past as an employee at some even larger organizations. So I think that was the first lesson, was to just sort of want to control what you can control, but also be a team player, be a partner still, and be an employee of your company first. Because if you go outside of that and you try to control too much, it gets away, and it gets really frustrating as well. I think, if unless you can have that approach of just being mindful about what you can control and really focusing on what the ultimate goal is, which is to make the customer or the user happy.
Fantastic. So let's talk about Your book, Radical Therapy for Software Teams. Tell us, what is radical transparency and how does it actually make a team better?
Yeah. Well, I think the thing that I've learned and over the years, I think I've learned a lot about process and tools and how best to put a team together. But I think the thing that I learned the most over the last, I guess it's been 5 years, which is really sort of pre-COVID and during COVID, what I was sort of amazed by is how similar and how different it is to work with remote teams. And when you're working with remote developers or remote team members in any way, communication becomes so primary and important. And I think in a lot of tools and processes, that's the emphasis of that. But it's also about task management and prioritization. And what I felt like was missing from a lot of those is the organizational transparency and mimicking that inside of your product and pushing that back as well so that you can get more transparency from your organization. And I learned a lot of that early on when I was working for government agencies and even nonprofits and NGOs that transparency is important when you're working with people that are really dependent on the products you're building. But I think also the team members and the people that you're working with. So radical transparency in this context is really about making sure that from day one, as soon as you start on a product, all of the stakeholders are in the room that need to be in the room, that you're communicating the changes and the decisions that have been made in that room or in that online area, whatever it is tool you're using, and that others have a chance to have a comment or have just a discussion about it. I think the thing that I focus on the most with the radical transparency movement inside of our book and inside of our organization is the idea that don't let process get in the way, move as quickly as your team can move, but also make sure that everybody on your team has a chance to have their voice heard, right? If it's a intern or a junior developer, or even it's, senior CTO, they all need to have a chance to be heard. Don't let one person dominate the conversation, but also make sure that those folks that do have thoughts or ideas that they get feedback on that as well. If it was a good thought, that you're communicating that back to them and giving them, kudos when they need it and also helping them along the way. And I think the other thing with that is making sure that when you are being transparent, it's not about the old problem inside of open source organizations was always that it wasn't friendly to the new user, right? There was a fear of contributing. And I think that's because people would be hypercritical sometimes in order to have their voice heard, they would criticize someone else. So I think focusing on positive feedback, but also being empathetic in that process and understanding that you want to help that person move forward in their development as a developer or as a manager or whatever it is that they're doing. So I think that's the main focus with radical transparency is being able to show everything that you're doing from day one. That means checking in from day one. Code goes out right away. You're building things in the open and accepting feedback and accepting ideas and new ideas, but still prioritizing and being really sort of merit based in your approach to who can contribute to what.
Okay, so for the junior developers and interns in our audience, what's your number one piece of advice for starting a career in tech today?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is don't be discouraged by I guess the world of AI and the tools that are available now and think that there isn't a space for a software developer. To me, I think more than ever, junior developers especially are needed in software development to be, if nothing else, to create new code, right? If you think about what AI does, it's basically mimicking what's already out there. And if we all continue to use AI, if you were to use an LLM to build an application, most everything that it would put into that application, if you're using Copilot, if you're using Claude, whatever it is that you're doing, Cursor, it's going to go out and find examples of code. It's basically doing what we've all done before, which is looking up for examples, copying and pasting in some cases into your application, testing it and running it. It's doing it maybe a little bit better than some of us, a little more, sly than some of us. But the reality is, we're just repeating the same code problems. And I think that AI can be really good at that and does do a good job with that. But if we need to get creative, if we need a new solution to something, that's where junior developers, that's where even senior and CTO developers that are still contributing and coding, those new ideas are what is going to eventually train the next set of models around these different AI tools. So we need that contribution. AI needs that contribution. But on top of that, it's still nowhere near ready to do something unique and creative. That's what a human in the loop is for, right? A developer in the loop in all of these things is important. So for a junior developer, you need to continue to grow and learn the codes and languages that you are learning, but also learn the operational side of things. Learn, if you're a front end developer, learn how the back end works. And if you're a back end developer, learn how the front end works and contribute to code bases, contribute to open source code bases wherever you can. And I think on top, don't be afraid of AI. Use it to learn. Use it to, once you've mastered a skill or mastered a certain pattern, then use it because it already knows how to do that. Use it to get that boring stuff out, but go back and check it. And then when you're done, that's when you can work on the really creative and next step stuff. So I think that's the main thing I would say is just don't lose hope. There's going to be room for you for a long time and need for you for a long time. And I think beyond that, don't be afraid. Embrace those tools, learn them, and then just help make them better and yourself better.
Great. So, Greg, let's talk about open source. So, how can a startup use cloud native and open source tools to scale efficiently without breaking the bank?
Yeah, well, I think that's one of the benefits of open source tools for the most part. They provide a way to work on these things without having to pay too much upfront. So you can build out a pretty large infrastructure with just open source tools to begin with. Even CI/CD tools, all of your operational build tools, code editors. I think you can get Visual Studio and GitHub Copilot all for free now at a basic level and really get started learning a lot of different things that way and having a built-in QA Copilot essentially helping to review your code. Open source is designed to help speed up that process, reuse templates, reuse processes, and then customize for your use case. Always making sure that you're reading the license and what you can do and what you need to contribute back, of course. But then beyond that, I think once you get into building an application or a new platform or infrastructure, there's not much you can do without using open source tools anymore. Every server that's running out there has some amount of open source, if not completely open source. Linux is basically the operating system of the web still. So I don't think there's anything that you can do anymore without touching open source at some point. So I think the main thing is making sure that you understand how open source works, how the license works, contributing where you can, getting involved, looking up. There's so many on GitHub that go unmaintained that want or are looking for new maintainers or new contributors. So look for those. And really, I think the best way to learn this stuff is to jump in and just sort of see if there's an issue you can fix. And if it's a language that you're familiar with, why not contribute to an open source tool and then build up that resume? Most developers, when I go to interview them for jobs that were places where I'm working, the first thing I do is look at their GitHub profile and look and see how many projects they've contributed to, what issues have they fixed, what languages have they learned, hopefully more than one, and they're continuing to evolve that way. Yeah, I mean, I think open source is a great way to build up your portfolio as a developer.
Okay, so Greg, you are a strong advocate for open source. So, what's the biggest advantage for a business that chooses an open source platform over a proprietary one?
Well, I guess there's two sides to that question. Really, there's a business that open sources their own platform, and then there's the business that uses open source. And I would say the first to the I guess to the second part of that, which is a business using open source. Like I said, it's hard not to use open source anymore, but and there are some proprietary platforms that you might want to build on. No code and low code tools are ones that I can think of. And the big drawback to those, in my opinion, is a lot of times the licenses are very complex and you don't own what you think you own. You're locked into a particular vendor. You can't go outside of that. I think of things like Salesforce, for example, and how you can get tied into a contract with them to where you're building things in their proprietary tools, their proprietary language. It's very difficult to then move on if you need to. Salesforce is pretty flexible in terms of what it can build and what it can how it can grow and the ability to scale, of course. But there's so many other tools like that that are low code and no code solutions, or even full platforms that have languages built into them that you learn that are proprietary. You end up tying yourself down, I think, to those platforms and those tools too often, and it doesn't give you flexibility in the future, or you're tied in so tightly that you can't even handle your own scaling, right? You don't know if it will scale enough to handle traffic, or if you need to scale back down. A lot of times the tiers aren't managed well enough for you to do that. So there's a lot of drawbacks to that. And then I think the flip side of that is using open source tools. Obviously, you have to know how to manage those, but you choose one that has a decent community or a growing community, or that you want to contribute to, and you build on top of that. And you're always, because most of those tools are built out of open source environments, you always have the flexibility to move on without them. If a startup closes, or if a business decides to shut down a service, you still have the code. You can still find somebody to maintain it, or you can maintain it yourself. And then on top of that, if you then also open source your own code and your own contributions and your own platform, yes, you still have to find a way to monetize that. And there's a lot of ways to do that, but you get the added benefit of contributions from your community, right? So you don't have to grow your team as much because you have other people contributing to the code base. You have other people finding bugs for you and sometimes fixing them, as we were saying. And you're building a community that feels like they have a lot of say in how things are done. And those are your users, right? Those are the people that are going to be contributing in the future, whether or not they're product managers, software developers, or just people from finance or HR, or whatever field they're in. They're going to feel like they have more transparency into what's happening. They can see issues in backlogs, and they can feel like their voices are heard in that process, as opposed to getting lost inside of a corporate area in a proprietary tool. So there's big benefits on both sides to focusing on open source.
So, how do you build trust and keep a distributed or global software team motivated and connected?
That's good. That's a good question too. I think in terms of building trust, really the best way that I found is just being transparent and open, communicating often about not just the team goals but organizational goals, and making sure that you're aligned with any larger organizational goals. Having a KPI tool that can help you manage the larger performance indicators throughout the organization is super helpful for that. And I've always advocated for making sure that whatever software development process you have is aligned with those as well, so that you can see what you're working on and how it aligns with the organizational goals. And then on top of that, with remote teams, you really need to make sure that conversations that normally would happen in the office or around the water cooler are being shared with those teams, right? Using tools like Slack, I think, has been great over the last, I guess, it's over 10 years, using that kind of tool to manage communication. But also, when you have all hands calls, making sure that everyone is involved in that in the office and outside of the office, where I think everybody's working at least partially remotely or has some remote team members. So making sure they're included in all of that, but also making sure that when you document a decision inside of an organization, that that's clearly labeled and shared with the throughout, and that you can always point to that as you move forward. And it's one of those issues where if you're working on a product or you're working on a portion of an issue or something, and somebody outside at a higher level, like a C level, comes in and makes a change or puts in a directive, having a process that's in place, especially with the speed that things go at now with AI, that you can build out and release, whole sets of functionality in hours instead of weeks now. You need to make sure that those communications are happening throughout the team and clear, and that those decisions aren't happening in a vacuum. And I think that really goes a long way towards that. But on top of that, having those weekly team meetings and clearly giving everyone a chance to communicate, and then having one-on-ones with team members, and not just when something goes wrong. You need to continually have those and let them know where they stand and what you're looking for and what you're working towards as well. I think everyone at some level understands that everybody has a boss and everybody has somebody that they're responding to or working with, and letting people know that this is what I've been asked to do and this is what my team needs versus your team. I think those types of communications and being clear and transparent about it is the best way to build trust, but also just being inclusive, right? Beyond just having a team that everybody feels like they have a say and that it's a good, well balanced, diverse team. I think the other aspect of that is just letting everybody have a way of communicating to the entire team, every stakeholder in that team, right? So not building software where the developers are over in one part of the building and the product managers are over in another part, and they're all making decisions around business and we're making decisions around technical ideas. For the most part, all of that can happen in one place, right? There's some business things that maybe as a developer you don't care about, but you still want to be able to see it. And I think the vice versa, the magic that happens in a software development practice, I think people are more and more starting to understand how that works, especially with AI to explain things for them. So just being transparent and open about that as well, I think that a lot of trust is built that way. And it is one of the biggest issues is trust between cross-functional teams, as well as just trust with stakeholders and customers, building that by being straightforward and transparent about what's happening within your platform as well.
Great. So, with Buildly Labs, you are building AI tools for product development. Tell us, Greg, where is human oversight most critical in an AI-driven workflow?
That's a really good one too. I believe almost at every step of AI, you need to have some sort of human oversight. Even now, when there's far less hallucinations, especially the more complex LLM models, but as you start to use local LLMs and agents in processes, there's all kinds of areas for issues to slip by that you don't notice, right? So at some point, not only do you need to have a human reviewing the changes that are happening inside of your product as AI works on certain aspects or as you use AI to work with you on fixing those problems, but you also need to have a process that reviews how the LLMs and the various agents are working within that data and within that organization, because a lot of times it's self-referential, right? So an LLM can learn from what's been sent through by a customer or a user. And so from an ethical standpoint, you need to have someone reviewing that so that your data's clean and that you aren't saying things that don't represent you or the organization. But also I think you need to have someone reviewing the things that are being trained. and what data sources are we, because for a lot of us that's a black box that we don't understand. We know there's tokens, we know that things are happening in the background and that they're getting better, but we aren't reviewing that. So the best we can do is just sort of test it on our own. So being a, let's say, reformed software developer who also realizes the importance of QA, I I think QA for LLMs is more important than ever in that process because it's also essentially a data source and pushing out data to the user. And if we aren't using that ourselves, if we aren't reviewing that, who knows what it could be saying eventually, right? And we need to be on top of that, and then have a easy way for user to report issues with the AI and then be able to diagnose it as well. So, if anything, I think it's made software development more complex in a lot of ways. It's sped up a lot of the boring stuff for us, like I said, but those details that you get into and the data that's being shared back and forth with the user, that's, I think, more important than ever to have humans reviewing that, fixing that, testing that.
Fantastic. So, looking at the future, what is the most under discussed ethical issue that we face as AI becomes part of the software development life cycle?
Yeah, it's interesting. Was in a conversation at Linfield University here in Oregon, and they have an AI for work program that I was advising on, and one of the team members brought up the question around how to maintain an ethical AI. Is it even possible for an AI to be ethical, or what are the ways that you could manage that? And I think that's the biggest problem that faces us right now with AI is our ability to understand how it goes through and pulls data and what data it's sharing and what it's been fine tuned. Because, like I said, it's a black box for a lot of us. We use something like DeepSeek, or we use a llama or Gemini or OpenAI, and they tell us how they've trained it for the most part. We can interact with it, but nobody's going through and checking the billions of tokens to see what it's been trained on and how it's going to interact. And then how do we then fine tune it on top of that if we do? And what is it changing, or what are we changing with that process? And I think that's the biggest issue is not letting it take over too much of that. And I think within that is what we talked about a little bit earlier is we rely so heavily on AI now and what it's been trained on, and then it needs new data sources to grow, right? And if we're using AI to generate articles, if we're using AI to write books, write music, right, all of these things, it's just going to start learning from itself eventually, and we aren't going to have as much of a contribution, and it's not going to grow because it doesn't get creative in that way. It's not a uniquely thinking individual. It's a collection of tokens that are then repeated in an orderly fashion, right? So if we aren't contributing and creating new ideas, creating new products, creating new code, we're going to end up stalling, right? And not having creative things. So I think that those are the two biggest problems: is finding a way to make sure and ensure that an AI stays ethical and is ethical. And then the second part is like the new sources that it needs, we need to keep contributing. Don't let it take over the creative processes, the investigation, the critical thinking that needs to happen around these things, and do that yourself. Be able to then use AI as a source, not as the only source. And I think those are the two biggest challenges.
Great. So, tell us, after 25 years in tech, what does the word innovation truly mean to you now?
That's a funny question. I used to have a boss at an organization I worked at who hated the word innovative and innovation because he thought everything's been done before. There's nothing innovative in the world. And I think for a while I kind of started to agree with him in a certain way. But as I started to look more and more, and as I look at what's happening with AI, and as I look at things that are unique and individual in the world now that I've traveled a lot more since then as well. I think innovation comes from taking something that was old and modifying it to fit a new problem, right? It doesn't, I think in a way, everything has been done at some point, right? But the way that you innovate, the way that you make something new is to learn from those past tools, mistakes, ideas, problems, and make them better. Or in some cases, make them worse and then eventually get better. Most of it comes from mistakes or problems that you see that aren't being fixed and aren't being addressed. And sometimes there is a tool for that, right? Built the same tool that somebody else has many times and gone out and found it later. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, right? It doesn't, just because there's already a GitHub or because there's already an open AI doesn't mean somebody else shouldn't do it and couldn't do it better. That is the way that we innovate. That is the way that we grow, not just as a software developer, but you know, as humanity, right? The way that we move forward is by learning from the mistakes of the past and coming up with something hopefully that improves on that and is better. So I think that's innovation to me is about making mistakes, learning from them, and then making something better from that. And really, that's what everybody, any junior developer, intern developer, that's what I say. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Make sure that when you get stuck, let us give you some help. But I think for innovation, that's the way that that's really the way that it happens is you work on something and you either learn from somebody else's mistake or learn from your own mistake and then make it better.
All right, that's a really outstanding perspective you put things into. So, finally, for listeners who are captivated by this conversation, what's the best place for them to, connect with you, find your book, and check out the tools that you are building at Buildly Labs?
Yeah. Actually, Buildly if you go to buildly.io, that kind of is the landing place for everything that we do. The book is incorporated into our idea. What we call the radical process is our software development process that's built off of the ideas in the book around using AI and using AI ethically to speed up your software development processes and product management processes and combine them and work together. So labs.buildly.io and just our buildly.io website. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. A lot of what I post there is about that. We also have a junior developer program that we run through a nonprofit called Open Build that I've been doing for, I guess, over 10 years now. And that's a great way if you're a software developer to get involved and learn about open source, learn about how to use AI in your software development process. And then, yeah, we've got a lot of open source projects that get run through there that need help as well. So those are the best ways. And yeah, the book is linked through radicaltherapy.dev, but you can find it again through Buildly.
Great, wonderful. So, Greg, it's been a really insightful, really interesting conversation with you, and I'm excited to have you on the show today.
Thanks, Zio. It was great to meet you, great to talk, and some really great questions. So I'm excited to share those.